Hello, welcome to the Environmental Justice and Climate Justice Studies Research Hub at UCSB Orfalea Center for Global and International Studies. In this hub, we are moved by the conviction that today's most pressing environmental problems come to us nested inside a historical moment characterized by growing racial and gender formations of economic inequality, increasingly neoliberal and authoritarian political institutions, degradation of human rights and public discourse, and pernicious forms of institutional violence that cut across and exacerbate each of these concerns. EJCJ brings together scholars to engage with these global drivers of environmental and climate crisis and investigate their deep structures and histories. At the Hub, we produce critical knowledges at the intersection of the humanities and social sciences, build transformative knowledge networks that bridge academic, social movements, and policy domains, and actively intervene publicly in each of these crucial zones of conflict. In this video, we will present a brief history of the EJCJ Hub. We will also present our Global South and Global East research partnerships. And we will also present this year nearly carbon neutral conference that is called Radical Climate Justice for the Global Commons. As for the Global South, Global East research partnerships, we will talk about the CAME-RO project, led by Professor Annelies Lewallen. Then we will talk about indigenous resistance in Amazonia, a project led by PhD candidate Silvia Cifuentes. Then we will talk about the global tapestry of alternatives with Professor John Foran. Then I will talk about Sinaca Radio, land defense in central Mexico in times of COVID-19. And we will end with Dr. Richard Widick with the case of Chile, power and resistance in Chile's mining and forest sectors. The information you will find in this video is part of what you will find in the website, dedicated website at the Orfalea Center.
Sure, I'm John Foran. I teach sociology and environmental studies here at Santa Barbara, and I am a founding member of the Environmental and Climate Justice Hub now some 6 years ago. Yeah, I would say that the idea for the hub probably germinated around 2013 or 14 when I started working with students around global climate governance and global climate justice movements. And the forerunner of the hub was a non-university network called the Climate Justice Project with myself and students, now some of whom are professors elsewhere. And we produced an ebook of interviews that we did at COP 18, I want to say, in Warsaw in 2013. And then coming back to UCSB, this is not a lifelong research area for me. I only really became completely centered on the climate crisis around 2009. So there was a process of coming to UCSB. I was away for 2 years in England with that new interest in 2010. And I started to try and find the people on the campus who were interested in climate crisis, climate justice, and environmental justice. And slowly out of this crystallized calling some folks together around 2014, I want to say. People like Ken Hiltner from the English department and David Pello from environmental studies. Richard Widick, who is a collaborator of mine at the COPs, at the climate conferences. And we hit upon the model of doing, and this is in 2015 now, we hit upon the model of doing what Ken Hiltner modestly calls nearly carbon neutral conferences. And that is to have a conference open to the world, open to the participation of anyone with no barrier of having to have the means to travel, which is expensive and of course bad for the climate crisis itself. It seems a little ironic that we would fly to conferences to discuss the climate crisis. And with that model, we were able to do a series of conferences starting in 2016. We've done one every year around a particular topic. Last year it was on the pandemic, the impact of the pandemic as a crisis on top of all the other crises. The big development in my book after 5 or 6 years was only a year ago when we decided that students needed representation and voice in the hub, and that has really invigorated the hub in a way that I'm so happy with. And so now the hub consists of about 15 people, about half graduate students and half faculty. And it's just a pleasure to work with the graduate students. They truly represent the diversity of perspectives that the climate justice work needs. And they have the ideas and the energy to make things happen. And, you know, as someone who's been involved trying to get my colleagues more active, that's been transformational to include students in the hub. The hub is in some ways organized around what we call constituent projects. And thus, if one of the hub members is working deeply on something, for example, Ken Hiltner in the environmental humanities, or myself and Richard Widick in a big project for climate education called NextTerra, which has become a big collaboration between the UC and the CSU systems to provide teaching materials, resources, syllabi, videos, lectures for faculty anywhere who want to sort of enhance and broaden their understanding of the climate crisis. And it's also, I think, accessible to high school teachers and students at both levels as well. So I think that's one of the biggest contributions of the hub so far. Most of the people are committed to the hub because we believe in a model of public scholarship, of public-facing knowledge production, to use the fancy academic word, that's available freely and for anyone. And in that sense, the hub is an open invitation that to grow a network. Some of the constituent projects reach beyond UCSB, such as NextTerra, which I just mentioned. The other project that's very dear to my heart is something called EcoVista. EcoVista is an adventure with undergraduates at UCSB, where we found that simply talking about systemic alternatives, creating a different world in classes would only take us so far. And it created a real desire to do just that. And so very happily, and it again was a student-initiated project, we started having classes that went out of the classroom into the community. And in EcoVista, we have a pretty robust program with working groups of all kinds. Trying the big goal is to turn Isla Vista, the community of 20,000 people adjacent to UCSB, 80% of them students and others long-term residents, into something like an eco-village, and to do it in the next 8 to 10 years. Because for us, that's the timeline on which decisive action has to happen. Something transformational, systemic has to happen. And the hope is that if we can do it here, others who are already doing it elsewhere will be in a network with, but we might inspire other, for example, college communities to try it. Because I think the education of the future and the scholarship of the future has to be in public, has to be out in the world. And if your goal is to, if the project in which you're engaged is something on the level of the climate crisis, arguably the big existential crisis of the 20th century, with really the fate of humans and much of life on the planet potentially at stake, you're going to have to get out of the classroom and you're going to have to figure out things and you're going to have to try things that have never been tried. And to do that, we have to collaborate. And the good news is that there's a lot of joy in that, and there's a lot of things come of it when you work with other people. And EcoVista is all kinds of things, including the EcoVista Climate Justice Press. We've created a press to publish electronically manuscripts and to make them available for free. The clearest sense in which the hub is an open invitation is the conferences that we do. And it's there where literally anybody in the world can participate. And it's in that way that, in that sense, that the hub is an open invitation to collaborate on local, national, regional, global levels. And in that sense, also to be part of a network of networks, really, communities, academic and activist communities all over the world that are trying to go in the same direction and need to meet each other. So the hub is a place, we hope, for those encounters to come and those connections to be made.
Hi, thank you so much for the opportunity to introduce our work. My name is Annalise Llewellyn. I'm a scholar activist working with Indigenous communities in India and Japan, and currently based at UCSB with this Environmental Justice Hub. So today I want to say a little bit about the work that I've been doing together with the Khasi people of Northeast India, as well as several graduate students here at UCSB. My field team went out and interviewed 4 very highly respected traditional healers in different locations across the state. We have a map here. You can see where they're located. And what we learned is that across the board, they were noticing devastation of their traditional forest where they harvest their medicinal herbs. They were also noticing major impact even on the sacred forest. So there's the factors of the mining, the coal and limestone mining. There's also the broom grass incursions. And then finally, there's a rash of poaching, people coming in from mainland India and poaching these medicinal plants. And so these are the sort of main areas that over the past 3 decades, the healers that we spoke to described as having really devastating impact on their ability to continue healing, continue their cultivation of the forest, but also continue the healing of the communities. Communities that are already heavily impacted by the loss of forest cover and the loss of agricultural fields are now made even more vulnerable by their inability to use their traditional sources of medicines to heal their bodies. Nevertheless, many of these traditional healers have been setting up kitchen gardens and trying to set up gardens in the forest, and even setting up small horticultural patches next to their traditional medicine clinics. And that's where they're now trying to grow the herbs. So they have been doing everything they can on their end to sustain this very important medicinal practice, and especially to keep the knowledge going. But the reality is they're up against some very significant, challenging structural forces. But for the most part, literature has not really sort of carefully analyzed or tried to wrestle with this question of what does it mean when biodiversity itself and the indigenous caretakers who ensure that biodiversity is tended and nurtured, what happens when that biodiversity and the indigenous knowledge itself is being deeply impacted by loss of land, by loss of plants, and then what does that mean in turn when local systems which allowed for self-sustaining and self-preserving knowledge, for example, using the plants to boost the immune systems, there's already a very important chain of knowledge transmission that is being passed on. And it's only able to be passed on as long as the forests are healthy, as long as the forest biodiversity is ensured, by making certain that the practitioners themselves continue to have access and continue to be respected and continue to have sovereignty, knowledge sovereignty, cultural sovereignty over the resources of the land and the relationships that they sustain with those places, with all of the beings in those places. What their stories are telling us is that not only they themselves, but their entire community, and in fact, all of us will suffer. So there's a lot that we can learn from that knowledge, and we need to begin understanding it and respecting it. And finally, I want to make sure everyone is aware of the fantastic webinar series. We're calling it a wake-up call for climate justice. Indigenous knowledges respond to the coronavirus pandemic. So we hope that all of you can join us for those. Please check out the website. More information is there. And thank you so much for allowing us to speak about our work today. Kublai Shibun and Yaidai Kire and Kakinas.
My name is Silvia Cifuentes. I'm a sixth-year PhD student in the Department of Global Studies. The project that I've been coordinating is within the Environmental Justice and Climate Justice Studies Hub is Indigenous Resistance in Amazonia. And the purpose of this partnership is to bring to the fore the perspectives of Indigenous peoples who have been confronting the double threats of extractivism and COVID-19 firsthand. So we have been coordinating with Amazon Frontlines, which is an NGO that works in the Amazon basin, particularly in the Ecuadorian Amazon. And through them, we have been coordinating with other indigenous organizations, such as Alianza Seibo and Alianza Minga, and with filmmakers and scholars who are also working in the Amazon basin. So we created two short documentaries, one by Osvaldo Nenkimo, who is an indigenous Awarani leader who works with Alianza Seibo, and another short documentary, which is about COVID-19 and food sovereignty that involves Alianza Minga. And the partnership has also sponsored the translation and subtitling of 2 episodes of the docuseries, such as Samai. And I think these are really important topics because we talk about the different connections between climate injustices and exploitation and extractive activities, such as the oil industry, for example, in Amazonia, and how these all of these factors put challenges to the resilience of indigenous peoples, but also how indigenous peoples with their knowledges about their ecosystems and their territories, they're also able to respond to the pandemic. So we explore the different structural causes of why indigenous peoples are having challenges and health inequities and so on, but also how through reviving knowledges, like they're very creative responses that are going on in Amazonia. I think it's important to see how some of the people who maybe are in a position of facing these double threats, as I was explaining, how the pandemic has hit them, but also how they have been able to respond to it through their own politics and autonomy and self-determination.
We're working most closely with Ashish Kotari Shrishti Bajpai and Vasna Ramasar. The Global Tapestry of Alternatives is a visionary web space in some ways that comes out of the remarkable book Pluriverse, a Post-Development Dictionary, published in 2019, which was a book that introduced 100 systemic alternatives as possibilities for confronting the climate crisis and confronting all of the crises that the world faces, in fact, in the moment, that are all intersected and come together in the climate crisis. So back at the end of the summer of 2020, we made contact with these partners, myself and Sylvia and Jessica, grad students in the hub. And we started a conversation about what we might do together. And we found that the Global Tapestry of Alternatives folks was interested in documenting the way communities were managing somehow during the pandemic. We hit upon the idea of trying to develop a project that would somehow bring perspectives from variously situated folks around the world who are involved in trying to find a better way to teach alternatives to the business as usual university, and are looking for new ways of doing things that are appropriate to the scale and the, the magnitude of the climate crisis. So far, we have been in 2 gatherings with sets of people involved with the project to discuss these issues. And with those as a basis, we are pursuing the possibility of creating a book of some kind, based partly on the conversations so far, and partly with other contributions from a network of people around the world. This project intersects with another project, another visionary network of alternative teachers called Ecoversities Alliance. We know that it's important to have conversations and to share what we know, share what we're experiencing with like-minded folks everywhere. And in doing so, we may be able to create templates, models, ideas, proposals that could be of use to teachers and students everywhere.
Hi, my name is Jéssica Coyotecatl, and I am a graduate student at the Anthropology Department at UCSB. Another partnership we developed is the one called Sinaca Radio, Land Defense in Central Mexico in Times of COVID-19, with a community radio station also called Sinaca Radio that is formed by peasant and indigenous youth in northern Puebla. I had the privilege of coordinating this partnership with Ana Salgado, who is a member of Sinaca Radio and other indigenous collectives and holds a BA in intercultural management. As part of this partnership, Sinaca Radio produced an original short documentary called Yet Another Crisis, a community radio's work during COVID-19. In this short documentary, Sinaca Radio presents its own history related to land struggles, as well as their fight for going and staying on air, and how they are facing COVID-19 right now. The partnership funded was allocated to secure interviews with 5 local organizations, local governments, and to produce original footage, as well as translation of the final product. This short documentary describes their collaboration with different organizations and their analysis of the root causes of the pandemic, as well as localized yet systemic paths forward. The research purpose of this documentary is to center the knowledge and experiences of a group of youth indigenous activists against COVID-19 and against extractivism in central Mexico. As part of the partnership, I interviewed 2 other media producers from Mexico. One of the interviews was with Mónica Montalvo from La Sandía Digital in Mexico to talk about the challenges for community-based media in Mexico before and during COVID-19. The second interview was with Jimena Torres from Zona Docs, a reporting online newspaper, also from Mexico, centered in investigative journalism. She discussed feminist journalism and land struggles during COVID-19. The research purposes of these interviews is a methodological one, since it is focused on a collaborative perspective of engaging with grassroots movements as well as public scholarship. Therefore, I invite you to check out the website that is now currently hosted by the Orfalea Institute to learn more about these perspectives and this project. Thank you.
My name is Richard Widick. I'm a sociologist and visiting scholar at the Orfalea Center for Global and International Studies at UCSB. The method I developed is a single case study combining social history and cultural analysis with contemporary media studies, environmental theory, and theoretical ethnography. Now, for the last 10 years, I've been applying that same theoretical and methodological approach to what I call the international climate wars. Now, looking forward, I'm launching what I call the Chile Project, again, using the same method of global historical and theoretical ethnography, focused especially on media studies and environmental theory. This is a dialectics of culture and nature type of thing. And you can read about that, of course, in my 2009 book, Trouble in the Forest. The official working title is The Case of Chile, Power and Resistance in Chile's Mining and Forest Sectors. The conflict, again, is the object of my study, the conflict over Chile's lithium and its great forests. But this time, the global structural, social, historical context is the so-called Green Revolution, green capitalism. And again, it's a colonial situation. Global economic forces internalizing Chile's mining and forest resources. Okay, but this time it's a green revolution, not just a market revolution like the last time when I studied the case of Humboldt County and the Redwood Forest. That was a case of American market revolution, which was just internalizing everything on the frontier. Now we're the world economic system needs Chile's indigenous lands and their resources to save planet Earth, right? So you see the contradiction there. The same system, the same institutions, the same modern social imaginary driven by property rights and political rights and free speech rights to set up a perpetual public sphere conflict over the internalization of these forests and these lands with essentially what promised to be pretty grave consequences for the people of Chile, for the Mapuche peoples, the indigenous knowledges and regions.
So I'm Dr. Lauren Gifford. I'm a human environment geographer, and I am a visiting researcher with the Environmental Justice and Climate Justice Hub at UCSB. And my day job is that I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Arizona's School of Geography, Development, and the Environment. This conference it's incredible. It's basically a master class of some of the best scholars in the world on environmental justice and climate justice research. So everyone records videos and then they upload them, but that means that we are getting participation from people that normally are too busy or too engaged or too far away to come and join a group of folks in Santa Barbara, but they can participate from Durban, South Africa, or places in the UK and Latin America, Asia, and participation was incredible. So the theme for this year is radical climate justice for the global commons. And this is because we want to think beyond just the atmosphere too often when we think about climate change, we're thinking about atmospheric concentrations of CO2, or we're thinking about how it impacts coastal communities or cities and things like that. And we really want to, like I said, imagine the possibilities of where radical climate justice can take us. And that's in any type of commons. And I want to leave that sort of with an asterisk of, broadly construed. Some of the past collaborators, we had Tracy Osborne, who is the new head of the University of California Climate Justice Center, and she's based at UC Merced. We've had Patrick Bond, who is one of the most leftist climate justice scholars for years. And he really bridges scholar activism. We had Larry Lohman, and he is an expert on financial markets and the commodification of carbon. We had Tamara Gelbertson, who just wrote a book on climate justice. It's just people from all over the world, people from the Climate Justice Now movement, which is amplifying the voices of marginalized communities within the UNFCCC framework. So many of these participants on the global format and in the global climate space are participating in the UCSB Nearly Neutral Climate Conference. Undergraduate students are encouraged to participate. Master's and PhD students encouraged to participate. We really want this to be a space where everyone is welcome and everyone's voice is heard. First gen students from outside the US, people, if English isn't your first language, come and share, and please share in the language that you are comfortable sharing in. And invite your friends. It's a virtual space. It can be as big or as small as it needs to be. We are just really happy to grab onto this term radical and run with it.
Thank you for taking this journey with us. We hope you visit the Environmental Justice and Climate Justice Studies at the Orfalea Center. You can see the address on your screen, and we invite you to be part of this community. Thank you.